friends. We're going to continue our learning in Chapter 7, Section 1. Right now we're going to talk about two special kinds of angles, adjacent angles and vertical angles. So, adjacent angles are angles that are right next to each other. Okay, they share a side and a vertex. So what that looks like is like the angles that I was showing you when we were labeling them. So if you have something like this, and an angle in the middle, they'll call them angle 1 and angle 2. Do you see how these two smaller angles, they share a vertex and they share a side? Therefore, angle 1 and angle 2 are adjacent. Okay? Now, the other special kind of angle, and we're actually going to be using these a ton, are called vertical angles. Vertical angles. Okay, vertical angles are directly opposite each other, still sharing a vertex, directly opposite each other. And the most important thing about vertical angles are they are congruent, which is our new geometry way of saying they are equal. And we like to use that knowledge all the time. So vertical angles, super, super important. So just labeling these kinds of angles, frequently you'll get a situation like this, and we'll call these angles 1, 2, 3, and 4. And they'll like you to ask you to list pairs of adjacent angles. And so those are any two angles that share a side and a vertex. So those could be angles 1 and angle 2. See that? Angle 1 and angle 2, they're right next to each other. They share a side. They share a vertex. Or we could do angles 2 and 3. Or, do you see that? So they're, again, right next to each other. They share a side right next to each other. Or we could do angles 3 and angles 4. Or you could do angle 4 and angle 1 if you're feeling crazy. Okay? Or you can list pairs of vertical angles. And there are only two sets of those. Vertical means that they are directly opposite each other. So that would be angles 1 and 3, or angles 2 and 4. Do you see that? So they're direct, they share a vertex, directly, opposite each other, and it ends up making them congruent. Now, when we're talking about angles and congruency and geometry and all of that, just like I've mentioned earlier, sides that are the same will put the same slash marks. With angles, you'll put little angle things like that. So those two, if they have the same mark, match. And then these, we would put 2 on them, preferably not over the names of the angles, but you know, it's fine. We're fine. Everything's fine. Alrighty. So now how we use this with algebra is they'll give us a situation that looks like this, and they'll ask us to say, solve for x. And they'll give us some angles, and let's say we call this 2x plus 2, and then we'll call this one 130. Now we know, because these are vertical angles, we know that vertical angles are congruent or equal, so we can set those equal to each other to be able to solve for x and then just do our algebra that we're super solid at now. Okay, so we'd have the 2x plus 2 here, and then we set that equal to 130 because we could do that because of vertical angles. And now we algebra, so minus 2, 2x stays. 2 minus 2 is 0. We don't have to write that. 130 minus 2 is 128. And then divide by 2. Divide by 2. X equals 64. Okay? Now, they might make the pictures a little bit more complicated and have multiple variables in there for you to solve for. So we could add in, say we had a 3y minus 10 in that angle, and we had a 50 degrees in this angle. Okay, so we could also solve for y. All right, and since the y is right here, we'd start with that one, 3y minus 10. And because of vertical angles, we can set that equal to 50 and then do our algebra. So we add 10 to both sides. 3y, negative 10 plus 10 is 0. We don't have to write it. 50 plus 10 is 60. Divide by 3, divide by 3. Y equals 20 degrees. Okay? So this is how we like to use vertical angles, is to solve algebra problems within geometry. Now there's one more you'll see on your Alex assignment that kind of jumps on the toes of tomorrow's assignment, but I still wanted it in there so that you could solve for some vertical angles as well. And what that is if you have, so let's say we had 6x here, we had 60 here. Now, if we had vertical angles, you could solve, if they gave you some angles here, you could use vertical angles to solve that. But right now, we don't have that. So to be able to solve for x, we're going to use the idea of supplementary angles, which, like I said, we're going to talk about more tomorrow. But a straight line adds up to how many degrees? Straight line is 180 degrees. So if we add these two angles together, we can set it equal to 180. So we could do 6x plus 60 equals 180. And then we just algebra like normal. And like I said, tomorrow we're going to talk more about this, which is supplementary angles. I have a whole fun way to help you remember it. Been waiting all year to get to teach it to you. Oh, that's a Y. Why did I? Oh, no, that's an X. Just kidding. We're good. All right. So there's that. And then we have one more quick little video for you for this lesson.